Got it. I figured it out in the end. Alrighty, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about community. So this journey we were on, 40 days, it's about us getting out there into the community. But I think it's good for us to have a theology on why. Like why should we do that? Why is it good to invite people? Why is it good to be praying for our streets? Like why is that at the heart of what we exist for, really? So I'm going to chat a little bit about that. But Shaz and I, even before we were married, we've been part of different churches now for very long. Since I kind of joined my first church as my decision, not my parents' decision, in 1999, it was. So what's that, 26 years, been actively part of a church community. And in those early years, we were crazy. You know, it was pretty much a meeting a day kind of church life. We had lots of time as students. We could go all the time. But it fashioned something in us. It formed something. And as what the kind of image that was going through my mind during worship was, during wartime, it matters what you did during peacetime. You know, like your ability to fight in a war is how well you prepared when there was no war. If you didn't prepare during peacetime, you'll get to wartime and you're stuck. You're like, oh, we didn't invest in the weapons. We have nothing to fight with now. And community is a little bit like that. In the moments when you need it, it matters where you're part of it. You know, and there have been a few. I'll tell you 3 stories. One was Ethan was 18 months, I think it was. Thereabouts. He was little. We were at home. He grabbed a thing of hot water that someone had just poured, boiling water, and tipped it over onto himself. So the water kind of came down his face and his ear and his neck. If you see him now, you'll still see the scars on his collarbone and his arm. So we obviously panicked, as parents do. Quickly got kind of something cool onto his face. We had burn shields, so we put those onto his face. We didn't realize that the water had gone down his jumper. And when we pulled his jumper off, all the skin just kind of peeled off with it. And we're like, oh no, this is bad. So we rushed to hospital. I climbed into the shower with him and stood in the shower just in my clothes for maybe 20, 30 minutes just to try and get it to cool down. And by the time I got out the shower, there was a bag there for me, fresh clothes. A whole lot of things had just happened in the background without me even knowing it. Like this community had just sprung into action where while we were in this kind of trial that we were facing, everything just mobilized. There was no central body, there was no organizing committee. It was just community that happened in action. And it was amazing. I mean, obviously Ethan he still needed to get healed from all of that, and he's now fine. But it just made me think, man, how grateful I was in that moment to have those people around who just kind of were there when we needed them. Another one was a few years later. I was traveling in the US. I was in San Francisco, woke up early in the one morning and got the news that Sharon they'd been robbed. She was visiting her mom in another city. Some people had broken into the house, tied them up, tied Sharon up, tied her mom up, tied her stepdad up. Jude was asleep in the cot. Ethan was very inquisitive as to what was going on. Why are they tying you up, Mom? You know, what's going on? Why are they taking the TV? Like I'm not going to be able to watch something. So you can imagine this is a terrifying situation to be in. I wake up in Los Angeles, San Fran, wherever I was, and I'm like, what do I do? I'm stuck. My wife's in a different city. I'm on literally the other side of the world. I can do nothing. So I phoned a friend, a guy that I knew. Bear in mind, this is not a city that we lived in, but community is something which transcends those kinds of boundaries. I phoned Clint. Now, Clint is the best of every guy in this room. Imagine the greatest human being in the world, and that's him. And by that afternoon, there were security guards outside the house. There was shopping that had arrived. Everything was taken care of. Because in the midst of that crisis, that community, again, just sprung into action in a way that you can't even pay for that kind of thing. You know, and yet the church does it for free. We just are like that. That is how God designed it for us to be. But if you want to win in wartime, you've got to invest during peacetime. The last story is it was kind of investing in peacetime. So I had at that stage, probably like mid-20s, maybe 30-ish, there were a few guys that had just come into our church that were struggling. The one guy was a drug addict, a proper drug addict, and the other guy was addicted to all sorts of other things and in and out of relationships. The other guy was struggling with work. The other guy's dad had just had an affair and was in a bad place. I said, all right, like enough of this. Every week, 6 a.m., whatever day of the week it was, we're going to meet at our house, and we're just going to go through this together. And so we did that for a few months. And all of those guys now are the one guy's leading a church in London. Other guy's one of my closest friends in Germany. Now this is 20 years later. The other two are, beautiful families. And it's just that community is that thing that happens where the gospel takes root. It's not the object in itself, but man, it's a great side effect of the object itself, which we'll look at. So I'm going to read you this little quote, which I love, which is about communitas, which is this sort of wrap on community, if you like. The word means community formed under fire. And often when you say community, people think of just kind of the comfortable, nice suburban supper club vibe. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that genuinely stand with one another. When the chips are down, we're together. We're fashioned, and that's the kind of community that God is fashioning here. So just listen to this little quote. Communitas happens in situations where individuals are driven to find each other through a common experience of ordeal, humbling, transition, and marginalization. It involves intense feeling of social togetherness and belonging brought about by having to rely on each other in order to survive. Communitas describes the dynamics of the Christian community inspired to overcome their instincts to huddle and cuddle and to instead form themselves around a common mission that calls them onto a dangerous journey to unknown places, a mission that calls the church to shake off its collective securities and to plunge into the world of action, where its members will experience disorientation and marginalization, but also where they will encounter God in one another in a new way. So that's what we want. Community is at the heart of the gospel, and the reason it is because the gospel does two things. It reunites us with God, the Father, and it reunites us with one another, the body, the church, his family, his purpose. And sometimes we lose sight of this. Sometimes community becomes an end in itself. It's not. The goal of community is to get out. It's to not be comfortable. It's to get out onto the road. Sorry, Julie, you're going to have to do it in 15 minutes. It's to get out there and to engage the world around us, to actually be out there. That's at the heart of it. But often, many of you may have had this experience of just getting into a church and not finding that. And for that, I am sorry. And I would apologize on behalf of all churches everywhere if your experience of church is bad. But if we don't find Christ in the church, eventually community will let you down. Eventually it'll be just another social gathering where people will disappoint. So we have to have at the core of it this understanding that it is Christ that inspires community, not the benefits. The benefits are good, and we want those, but it's actually at the core of it is this notion of, no, this is the gospel. It's because of what Christ did that he reunited us with the Father. And so what I want to do in that light is to just look at 5 truths in the Bible about community, and then 5 hows, and we're going to break into some groups and discuss them after that. And the 5 truths really, even if you don't yet believe, if you're here and you're not yet a Christian, that's okay. Like, this is a place where you can belong before you believe. But just know that our objective is to try and convince you so that you do believe, because actually it's in believing that all of these things start to become life to us. Okay, everyone with me? All good? Yes? Yep. Fantastic. So 5 things that I just wanted to share about community and how we see it in the Bible. And the first one is this, is that God lives in community. The Trinity is something which the Christians have discovered over millennia, that actually God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and they made us people in their image, in the image of God. And so the idea of community is not something that's just good for people. It's actually in the very nature of who God is this loving, deferring, trusting, honoring one another, which we see in the Godhead. And so that's kind of my first point, is it's a divine idea. It's at the very center of who God is this idea of community. The second one is this: it's not good for us to be alone. Shaz sent out the message yesterday, I think it was, just talking about that Genesis passage where it says it's not good for man to be alone, and that was obviously in the context it then made Eve. But the church is the church together. It's the body. Like, you can't have a Christian that's just on their own. That's like a dead cell, It's just you've got to be connected. It doesn't make sense otherwise. We have to be in it together. Daisy shared something on a group we were on about the armor of God and how there's no armor that protects your back, in that Ephesians 6 passage. And it's kind of by design, because we need one another. We're always advancing. We're on the offensive, but actually our protection comes from the people around us many times. And I'm sure every single person in the room can probably relate a story like that, like the ones I've shared, where actually you needed somebody else to help you. The third one is it's God's best for us. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians where Paul talks about somebody that's caught in sin, and after they're kind of trapped in this pattern of sin, he tells them to kick them out the church because they're unrepentant. And it just, I remember it dawned on me, it hit me like a flash of light, just realizing the worst punishment that the church can put on somebody is to kick them out, is to say you're no longer welcome here in this fellowship. That is the worst thing that the church can do to somebody by order of kind of gravity of discipline, if you like. Hardly ever gets there. It's never gotten there here, so it's not meant to be a heavy. But the corollary is true as well, which is the best thing for us then surely must be to be in community. Like, if the worst thing you can do for somebody who's unrepentant is to take them out, the best thing you can do for somebody who's repentant is bring them in. And that's why the church exists. It's God's best for us. The fourth one, which is really what prompted this whole session today, is the word hospitality. The Bible talks about it often, and who knows what that word means? Anybody? I've said it before. The Greek word? No? So the Greek word is philoxenia, which is the love of strangers. So the word hospitality literally means, it's the opposite of xenophobia, is the hatred of strangers, of foreigners coming into the country. Philoxenia is the love of strangers. It's the love of the foreigner. It's the love of the person that's not like me. And so whenever you see the word hospitality in the Bible, that's the word being used, the love of strangers. It's literally what it means. And so I'm just going to read you 3 of those verses. So Romans 12:13 says, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Seek to show the love of strangers. Hebrews 13, do not neglect to show hospitality. And here they had to add 2 strangers because of the next bit. For thereby some have entertained angels unawares. And the last one, 1 Peter 4 verse 9, show hospitality to one another without grumbling. And we'll look at it in the second section, this notion of one another. But often the hospitality is to one another, and you would think, well, if it's one another, then it's people that I know, because it's other people in the church if he's writing to it. But the point there is almost like show hospitality not just to the people you're closest to, but actually to everybody. Show that love of the new person that's arrived. Show hospitality, show the love of the stranger to one another in your midst. And it really, like, the opposite of that would be the kind of clique environment where you get to a place and it's like, actually there's this tight group and it's hard to get in. That is the opposite of what hospitality means. Hospitality means specifically, like, show hospitality to strangers, and make room for strangers. And so that's what we want to do. You guys have heard me use the quote that we exist for the benefit of our non-members as Greenhouse Church. That's at the core of what community is about. Yes, it's good for us, but it exists for the others. We want to extend it out. If you look through the Gospels, Jesus spent most of his time sitting around tables, having meals with, maybe not most, he spent a significant portion of his time with strangers, tax collectors, people that others didn't want to associate with, the foreigners, the strangers, the outcasts. That's who he engaged with, and calls us to do the same. And so I want to say your home is your secret weapon in this. It doesn't matter what your home is like. It could be super fancy. It could just be one room. We were chatting about this at men's group. Was it men's group? Nathan was just recounting the Ugandan story about the lady with nothing really, who invited them in and just offered everything. And all she had was her prized possession, the banana chips. Bananas, which is pretty much all the food that you have, and she just freely offered it. So hospitality doesn't need to be a fancy meal. It can be, but it can also be a very simple, as we saw in the video a couple of weeks ago, just a cup of tea and a biscuit. You know, that's good too. The point is our heart and how we invite people in. And the last one here is, just as a little side note, it's one of the criteria for leadership. When you look through the Bible, it's like, you know, practices hospitality, and you see that in there. So it's something which, if we're serious about our faith and we're serious about wanting to lead others and disciple others, then this is at the core of it. Okay, so those were the truths about hospitality, just some kind of a biblical basis for it. And what I want to quickly look at now is just 5 things that come out of once we engage with Christ on this and we see how he lived, there are 5 things that should flow from that in these one another. So that phrase one another is used, I think, 51 times in the New Testament, a bunch in the Old, but it's a big theme through Scripture, and I've categorized it into 5 sections about what we need to do. And as you listen to this, the question that you're going to go through in your groups is, how do we do this? Not when I say we, I mean as individuals. Like, what does it look like for you in your 15-minute walk or engaging your community to exhibit these kind of one another traits, if you like, to others? And we're going to ask you to share that. Okay, so the first one is having the mind of Christ. So I'm just going to read some scriptures, make a few comments on them. So here, Philippians 2 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count one another more significant than yourselves. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another." See, Jesus' actions flowed from a genuine love for people, not from insecurity and also not from pride. Those are kind of the 2 extremes you can oscillate between. I'm better than others, or I need to prove myself. Whereas actually he had a deep security, and out of that security came a deep love. And community, or what we do in community, how we express this love for one another, needs to come from that as the heart motivator, not as I'm trying to prove myself, if that makes sense, out of insecurity. It's rather, no, I genuinely care in the same way that Christ cares. The second one is to offer his welcome like Christ did. Romans 12, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Romans 15, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you. And 1 Peter 4:9, show hospitality like that love for the stranger to one another without grumbling. And so the second point around hospitality is it really is this, it's this genuine, like, I want to welcome you. I want to show you love. I want to engage with you in a way that you feel welcome, that you feel loved. Thirdly, the third kind of layer to it is to speak his words. Colossians 3, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another with all wisdom. It's actually challenging one another, like sharing with them. 1 Thessalonians 5, encourage one another and build one another up. And Hebrews 3, exhort one another every day. So part of us getting together is not just to listen, that's good, but there's actually, we saw this beautifully in the men's group where Nathan wasn't quite the youngest, but he was pretty much the youngest in the room. Just such wisdom from him in what he shared to one of the other guys that was sharing. And this is what we do in community. It's not just a kind of a pity party. It's actually no, we're going to encourage one another and try to sharpen and challenge and speak the words of Christ, which will hopefully help change our lives. Fourthly is to show his love. 1 Thessalonians 5, always seek to do good. Always seek to do good to one another. This is something I've got to speak to our boys about all the time. Always seek to do good, because they don't always, especially in the game of Catan, seek to do good to one another, which is, I suppose, normal, but you can still be kind, boys, in how you play the game. I came home today and Rourke was on the couch reading. And I was like, Rourke, what's going on? Because he didn't want to talk. The other two were over there playing Catan. Clearly something had gone down. Rourke was on the couch, not able to play anymore. Somebody had stolen his sheep. What have you done? So always seek to do good to one another. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. It's 1 Peter 4. As each has received a gift, use your gifts to serve one another. And the last one in this part is bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. It's Galatians 6. So I think that's self-evident, just genuinely loving one another, like doing things, actually exhibiting it, showing people that you love them. And then lastly is extending grace, extending his grace to others. Bear with one another in love. Bear with one another in love. Sometimes people do things that will be annoying. It's normal. Like if you think of a family environment, it'll happen. And this is bear with one another in love. Actually, the objective is for us to all grow up in maturity. And then last verse in here is to be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. That's Ephesians 4. And so as we break into groups, the last kind of verse I want to land on is kind of wrapping it up, which is the words of Jesus. He says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also to love one another. By this, the way in which you love one another, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So you kind of see in this one verse the beautiful culmination of all of those ideas, which is the object is for all people to see. Hey, buddy. The object is for all people to see. Like that's actually what Christ wants. And the way in which they're going to do that is by us unapologetically living this out in our own lives for all to see. Does that make sense? So what I want us to do now, we've got maybe 10 minutes. Is that good? Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. Is just to break into 4 groups. We'll do one here, kind of the 4 corners. And I just want you to share with a group, what does this look like in your own life? So you don't have to get philosophical, and if you don't have anything to say, that's fine. But just discuss it. What in here has stood out to you? You think, hey, I want to take that onto my 15-minute walk, or how this works in my kind of community over these next 30-odd days that are left. And then each group will pick one person, and that one person's going to have 1 minute to then share back to everybody at the end. Is that cool? Okay, all right, off we go. One group here. You can move around if you want. We're going to split into the 4 groups.